like a sport these days. It's like a game, you know? My team versus your team, who's up, who's down. And maybe that's because politics has kind of become an inside game, you know? Politicians have been playing it all their lives. We have people like Hillary Clinton who sit inside the system, raking in millions by selling access and influence. And we have people like Donald Trump sitting outside the system making billions by buying off people like Hillary Clinton. That's the game, folks. That's the game that's been going on for a long time. The political establishment and crony capitalism. The only thing is, it's not a game that most of us can play unless you won Powerball, of course. And the game isn't working for us anymore. You know, this has been a country of limitless possibility for me. I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world. I have done business and charity and policy work in every continent and virtually every country for decades. And I am keenly aware that it is only in this nation that a young woman can start out the way I did, typing and filing and answering the phones for a 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a deep recession in the late 70s, go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible in this great nation. I have to tell you though, along the way, I've had a lot of people tell me to sit down and be quiet. Settle. Don't challenge the system. I have ignored that advice all of my life, but I am running for the presidency of the United States because I think the American people are being given that same advice. Sit down, be quiet, settle, don't challenge the system, and I do not think we can do that any longer. Sit down and be quiet about our God, about our guns, about the abortion industry. We're being asked to settle for problems that have festered for decades. You name it, illegal immigration, spending out of control, our inability or unwillingness to care for our veterans. Why are we settling for this, ladies and gentlemen? Why are we settling for a nation that used to be a place of limitless possibility, regardless of our circumstances? And yet, in this nation today, we have record numbers of men out of work, record numbers of women living in poverty. Our young people don't even know the American dream exists for them anymore. Working families' wages have stagnated for decades. And meanwhile, the rich get richer, the powerful get more powerful, the well-connected get better connected. Crony capitalism has gone on and on under Republicans and Democrats alike. Why are we accepting a system of government and politics that no longer works for us? Here is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Government has grown bigger and bigger for 50 years under Republicans and Democrats alike, and yet at the same time it has grown more inept and more corrupt. Why are we settling for a government that isn't even competent enough to secure our borders or to figure out that terrorists pledged their allegiance to ISIS on Facebook posting years ago? For heaven's sakes, I checked out my older granddaughter's new boyfriend on Facebook. If I can do that, the government can be competent. And meanwhile, what do we get election after election after election? You're sophisticated consumers of politics. Ask yourself this: how many presidential cycles have politicians stood up here and promised you to cut government down to size, to reform the tax code, to care for our veterans, to secure the border? We hear about the same issues election after election after election, and yet nothing changes. They promise us much and deliver us little. You see, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and I'm fed up. We feel as though we are losing power in our lives, power to control our own future, power to hold the government we pay for accountable and cut it down to size. And yet, all of these problems can be solved. But we have to remember who we are. Ours was intended to be a citizen government. We were never intended to have a professional political class or a government growing out of control. I will not sit down and be quiet, and I don't suggest you do either. I am running for the presidency of the United States because, citizens, it is time. It is time that we take our future back. It is time that we take our politics and our government back. Citizens, it is time. We must take our country back. It is why I have rolled out my blueprint to take our country back. I hope you'll ask me about it during Q&A, but the blueprint are the things that we must do first to take our country back. They're not the only things we must do, but they are the first and most important things that we must do, and we can get these things done together. I'm putting it in writing. I'm calling it a blueprint because, amazingly, I would like you to hold me accountable. You see, I'm used to being held accountable. You know, in the world we come from, not the political world, the world we come from, we know that actions speak louder than words. That someone's character is known by what they do, not by what they say. We know that talk is cheap and that results matter. Do you know how you go from secretary to CEO? You produce results over and over and over. You do what you say you're going to do. You ask people to hold you accountable. Hold me accountable for this. Together, we can get this done and solve these problems. Now, you may not have made up your mind who you want to support, but in your heart of hearts, you cannot wait to see me debate Hillary Clinton. Because you know I'm gonna win. You know I'm gonna win. And winning is actually very important. Mrs. Clinton has escaped prosecution more times than El Chapo. Perhaps Sean should interview her. But the truth is, she's not going to be held accountable until we have a fearless fighter who will face her down on that debate stage and remind her that although she has held many titles, she has accomplished nothing. Remind her that she has gotten every single foreign policy challenge wrong. Remind her and the American people when she famously asked what difference it makes. Mrs. Clinton, this is what difference it makes. When our embassy is purposefully attacked by terrorists, and 4 Americans, including our ambassador, are killed, and the next day you stand up and lie about it to the American people instead of saying, the United States of America has been attacked by terrorists and we will seek retribution. Mrs. Clinton, you say to every adversary and every terrorist organization in the world, open season on America. That is what difference it makes, Mrs. Clinton. That is what difference it makes. We are not going to beat Mrs. Clinton or whomever else they come up with, Bloomberg, Sanders. I mean, we're not going to beat the ultimate insiders with yet another insider, crony capitalist, Donald Trump. We're not going to beat them with someone who has talked a good game all their lives but never made a tough decision in their life. A tough vote is not a tough call, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to be able to win unless we have a fearless fighter who will throw the punches. But once we are done winning, and I will win, then we have to think about what it actually takes to restore the character of this nation, to restore possibilities for every American regardless of their circumstances, to cut this government down to size and hold it accountable and lead once again in the world. And so I will suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that I am the most qualified person to win this race and to do this job. We need a president who actually understands how the economy works, how to create jobs, how to save jobs, what it takes and how jobs are destroyed. We need a leader who understands the world and how it works. The truth is, I have more foreign policy experience than anyone running. I've met almost as many allies and adversaries as Mrs. Clinton has, but I didn't do photo ops with them. I had private meetings with them on business or policy or charity. I have met our friends and our foes. I have held the highest clearances available to a civilian. I have advised as the chairman of the advisory board, the CIA, the NSA, 2 secretaries of defense, a secretary of state, a secretary of homeland security. I know our military and our intelligence capabilities and personnel very well. And I know that when this nation is not leading, the world is a very dangerous and tragic place. It's kind of important that we have a have a president now who understands bureaucracies, because the government has become one giant, bloated, inept, corrupt bureaucracy. And it has to get cut down to size and held accountable, and that's what the two first items on this blueprint are all about. We need a president who understands technology. Technology is a tool that I will use to harness your power as citizens to move the political establishment, but it is also a weapon that is being waged against us by our enemies, and we need a president who understands that and understands what to do about it. And perhaps most importantly of all, we need a president who understands leadership. You know, I used to think that leadership was about whoever had the big office, or the big title, or the big airplane. And then I got a little older and wiser, and I learned that people with big offices and big titles and big egos to go along with them were not leading. You see, leadership is not about the size or the shape of your office. It is most definitely not about the size of your ego. A leader challenges the status quo, because that is the only way we solve festering problems. A leader is a servant. The highest calling of a leader is to unlock potential in others. The highest calling of a leader is to unlock potential in others and serve others. My highest calling is to restore citizen government to this great nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will not sit down and be quiet, and neither will you. So do not sit down. Do not settle. Do not accept a system that no longer works for us. Instead, stand with me. Fight with me. Vote for me. Citizens, it is time. It is time to take our future back. It is time to take our politics and our government back. Citizens, it is time. We must take our country back. So, ladies and gentlemen, questions? Yes, sir. And then I'll come to you, ma'am.
Mr. Fiorino, my name is Jason Herman. I'm an Iraq War veteran.
Thank you for your service.
I spent 10 years as an Army combat medic, and I spent a year in Baghdad policing Iraqis with sometimes brutal tactics. Now I see police here at home using those same tactics with the same weapons and the same equipment that I use on black communities here at home. What would your presidency do to end the militarization of police and stop cops from killing everyday Americans?
Thank you for your service, first of all. And what a tragedy as well, that after this brave vet served, that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama declared victory in Iraq, withdrew every troop against all the advice of the military generals. They did so for political expediency, permitting ISIS to gobble up territory and weaponry. And now, with all due respect, Mrs. Clinton and Barack Obama, and Michael Bloomberg for that matter, climate change is not our most pressing national security threat. ISIS is. Where we have examples of real wrongdoing in the police force, such as we had in Chicago under Rahm Emanuel, amazing how the Democrats have been absolutely silent about what happened in Chicago. Silent because it was a cover-up by their good friend, Rahm Emanuel. Where we have cops who have done the wrong thing, they must absolutely be held to account. And that is why I have advocated for a long time that every single cop on the street needs to be equipped with a body cam so that we can see what really is going on. It's an investment that needs to be made. But I must tell you, sir, that I think we have to start by lifting up and honoring and respecting and valuing and listening to everyone who serves, from the cop on the beat all the way to the soldier in Afghanistan. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of that right now. Because while I cry for the parents of that young man who was slain in Chicago and a year-long cover-up went on, I don't hear a lot of tears for the cops who are assassinated in their cars on the corner. I will promise you, as Commander-in-Chief, I will value, support, invest in, listen, lift up, and honor everyone who serves and has served. We will finally reform the VA so that those who have served us can be cared for. And we will lift up and honor everyone who serves, from the cop on the beat to the soldier in Afghanistan. If someone has done something wrong, they must be held to account. Let us start, please, with some of our politicians.
Thank you, and thank you for running. I am pro-life, and it is not okay that we put a price tag on babies and body parts. What will you do to Planned Parenthood?
So I hope all of you who are here know that there has not been a more outspoken advocate for life and against Planned Parenthood than Carly Fiorino. March for Life yesterday in Washington, D.C. before they shut the city down. And the reason I know I have been the most effective advocate is because frequently at my events, Planned Parenthood protesters show up, they throw condoms at me, they shout and scream. But guess what? I'm not going to sit down and be quiet about this issue either. So let me tell you exactly what I'm going to do. Look, the American people have found common ground on this. Although the left doesn't want you to know this. The majority of young people, of women, of men, of Americans, the majority of Americans now understand that abortion for any reason at all after 5 months is wrong. So first, we're going to get the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act finally passed and put into law. Second, everyone would like you to believe that Planned Parenthood is about women's health. No, it's not. Because the Democrats will not fund community health centers. There are many more of those. They don't agree to fund through taxpayer money pregnancy centers. There are loads of those as well. You see, Planned Parenthood is a political operation. It spends millions of dollars, contributing millions of dollars to pro-abortion candidates. In a President Fiorino budget, there will not be a dime of funding for Planned Parenthood, but there will be plenty for women's health.
Okay, so the best way to stop abortion would be to educate young women with comprehensive sex education programs. And Republicans very often want to have abstinence programs which have been proven not to work. So what would your policy be for educating people to engage in responsible sexual behavior so that they don't have an unwanted pregnancy that might lead to an abortion?
You know, one of the things that I think is interesting, I don't know how many of you have ever visited a pregnancy center, but pregnancy centers are funded by private donations. They exist all over the country, and they are providing education, all kinds of education, by the way. They will help new fathers or fathers-to-be with skills and education, as they will help new mothers-to-be, and also provide education. Look, this is an issue, perhaps I should explain. You know, most people, when I first started running for office, they didn't believe that I was pro-life. They thought, oh, she's a Silicon Valley CEO, she must be pro-choice. See, I think science is proving us right every day. The DNA in the zygote is exactly the same DNA as the day you die. So I don't know how to draw that line. And my husband, Frank, who I've been together with for 34 years, his mother, yes, he's eye candy. That's my eye candy. You know, I introduced him to he's around here somewhere, but when I met his mother, I learned that she had been told to abort him. But she was a woman of great courage and faith, and she chose to bring her son into the world, and he has been was the joy of her life, and he's been the rock of mine. I wasn't able to have children of my own, so I learned in a different way how precious a gift life is. We buried a child. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I'm pro-life. But let me say something to you. Politics uses these issues to divide us. We don't all have to agree on everything, but know this. The real extremes in this debate are not Republicans, they are Democrats. Democrats whose policy is that it is not a life until it's born. Democrats whose policy is that a 13-year-old girl must have her mother's permission to go to a tanning salon, but not to get an abortion. Democrats whose policy is that it's okay for a Planned Parenthood clinic to be less regulated than a tattoo parlor. Democrats who consistently resist having birth control be over the counter so that it is cheap and widely available to anyone. I am not the extreme on this issue. Hillary Clinton is, but we have found common ground. So let's take the common ground on the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, let's take the common ground on funding Planned Parenthood, and let us go from there. Not to finish there, but to start there.
I had a chance to speak earlier. I'm a combat wounded vet. I was in a coma for 2 weeks. I got shot and then was hit by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. And thanks for you speaking as well, because we need more vets in politics. Second thing is, because everybody's got a bunch of questions, I'd like to know if I could just get 2 minutes with you afterwards. And my final question is when is the Republican Party going to stop attacking each other? And when are they just going to start going after Hillary Clinton? And if you need a combat wounded vet to stand with you and go after that girl, I'll be right there.
First of all, thank you for your service and your sacrifice and your heroism. Who is it in this race who has consistently gone after Hillary Clinton from day one? Fiorino. And I'm going to keep doing that. I can't speak for the rest of the Republican Party. All I can do is control my own behavior. But you have watched me debate after debate after debate take our fight to where the fight has to go. But let me just say one other thing to you, and I hope I can spend a few minutes with you, although I have a bunch of interviews right after this, but I'll be around. Let me just say this. I want to use the VA as an example of how much power you have, but also an example of why we cannot settle for what we're settling for anymore. Do you remember the scandal in the VA in Arizona, where we learned that veterans had died waiting for an appointment, and bureaucrats cooked the books so that nobody would find out? We were so outraged as citizens of this great nation that we flooded Congress with tweets and posts and emails and phone calls. And because of that enormous pressure from the citizens of this great nation, this Congress, this do-nothing Congress, acted in 3 weeks, record time. A bill flew out of the House, it passed the Senate 99 to nothing, and that bill said that we could fire the top 400 senior executives at the VA. It was precedent shattering, because we don't ever hold anybody accountable in government. But this bill says we can fire 400 senior executives in the VA. That was because of the power, the protest that you registered. Now, by the way, sadly, we all moved on. And so did the politicians. And despite all the pretty speeches they made during that 3-week period, we now have learned this. 307,000 veterans have died waiting for health care. And meanwhile, the VA handed out $142 million in bonuses for superb performance. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot settle for this. It is a stain on our nation's honor. And we have been talking about reforming the VA for 20 years. So, it is also an example of your power. So when I say I will lift up and value and support those who serve and those who have served. What I mean is we are actually going to get the VA reformed. I spend a lot of time with veterans, ladies and gentlemen, and every time I do, I take notes, because guess what? I'm going to put 15 veterans in a room and ask you, how do you want to be served? And you'll come up with a better blueprint for how to reform the VA than all the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. combined. And then we will move forward. But in the meantime, I'm going to take that lesson from your power. Let me tell you, the items on this blueprint, radically simplifying the tax code, finally, it's 73,000 pages today, which means it's crushing the economic engine of growth in this nation. How am I going to get that done? You know, I think we ought to have a 3-page tax code. Everybody, the pundits say it's impossible. There's been a plan for a 3-page tax code lying around for 20 years. We can get it done, just like we can get the next item on this list done too. Zero-based budgeting, fancy word, you know what it means? It means the government needs to budget the way you do, where we actually have to examine every dollar, cut any dollar, move any dollar. It's the only way we're ever going to get control of the money. Because you see, the way the government budgets now, how is it possible that they spend more money each and every year, as they have for 50 years? Under Republicans and Democrats alike, we have spent more money, and yet, they never have enough money. They never have enough money to serve veterans or to secure the border. Why? Because the money's spoken for. Because once you get a budget, you never have to give it back. All you got to do is ask for more. So we got to go to zero-based budgeting and cut this government down to size, hold it accountable, and get control of your money. Because, by the way, they're spending your money. How are we going to get that done? And what does that have to do with the power of citizenry in the VA? I'll tell you how I'm going to get it done. You have enormous power, but we don't use it. I will. Every week, I'm going to go into the Oval Office and say a weekly radio address. And I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones, or maybe your iPads, or maybe your PCs. If you have a flip phone, you might want to upgrade. That's a suggestion. In any event, I'm going to ask you to take out your smart devices of choice, and I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow citizens, do you agree with me that it is finally time to pass that 20-year-old 3-page tax code? Do you agree with me it's time to finally pass that bill? And there is a bill that's been languishing on the U.S. floor, House floor, for zero-based budgeting. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, there's an app for citizen government. Technology is an incredibly powerful tool. I am going to use it. You have enormous power, but when you don't use it, you lose it. I will channel your anger, your frustration, but most importantly, I will channel your common sense and good judgment, because we can fix every problem we have, but we have got to start by restoring citizen government in this great nation. Okay, we're out of time. I didn't see the red light. All your questions are so good. Can I do one more with that young lady? Yes, okay, real quick.
Where do you stand on lowering the maximum sentence for nonviolent crimes?
So I will try and answer this as quickly as I can. I know I'm overstaying my time, but it is a very important question. My husband and I buried our younger daughter, Lori, to the demons of addiction. And I know this is a grave problem here. I can remember standing in front of a judge and pleading with him not to send our daughter back to jail. He was sympathetic, I'm sure, but his hands were tied. We have to treat mental illness and especially addiction. We cannot criminalize them. And that calls for criminal justice reform, which is a federal government responsibility. You see, we have the highest incarceration rates in the world. Almost 2/3 of the people sitting in jails are there for nonviolent, drug-related, addiction-related illnesses. When we criminalize this, we are not treating people. I know this all too well. So yes, we have to invest in mental illness. We have to invest in drug addiction prevention and treatment. I've seen so many great programs around New Hampshire that are starving for money while the federal government is awash in it. And yes, we have to finally undertake criminal justice reform. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me.